Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome to just kind of a quick tutorial Denver William requested about covering blood magic nodes. And I figured today was a good time because my Enigmatica video will not be ready until tomorrow because I spent like 5 days working on something for Tails, which I will hopefully be showing off in a video coming up soon. So we're going to go ahead and cover some blood magic nodes today, just really quick move through this. Now, when it comes to nodes, there are a few different things. There are 5 different filters. There's an Nbt Item Filter, Mod Item Filter, or Dictionary Item Filter, Precise Item Filter, Fluid Filter. There's also frame parts, but those are just a crafting material. We're not going to be covering those. They don't do anything. And then you have your 4 nodes. You have your master routing node, your input routing node, your output routing node, and your routing node. And then you have the node router. This is all that there is within blood magic nodes. Pretty straightforward and pretty simple once you get the hang of it. And they are rather powerful. I ran an entire base on them without issues. But the key to any node system is you have to have a master routing node. Not every node needs to connect to this, but it needs to connect to this indirectly in some way by connecting to other nodes on the same system. So the master routing node on its own doesn't do anything in particular, it just controls the system. Now, in addition, you have what's called just a routing node. These, you can move connections through them, but on their own they don't do anything. Now, generally you're probably not going to be using a whole lot of routing nodes unless you have a very large base with no kind of connections in a large section of it, or if you're trying to move a node system a very long distance, because nodes, they have like, I don't know, like 100 blocks or something. I don't know the exact number, but they have a lot of range on their own. So the routing node may not come up all that often. Generally, I don't ever use these really. Occasionally they may come up. And then you have kind of the bulk of what you're going to be using. That's the input and the output routing nodes. Now, we're going to go ahead and just set up a couple chests. We're going to put an output routing node on this chest and an input on this chest, and we're just going to connect this up. This is a basic system. Now shift right click to select your node, and then shift right click to connect where it connects to. You can also do right click, but then you're going to be opening things up, so it's a little bit of a nuisance sometimes. And this is a basic system. Basically, this input routing node is going to input items into the system. This output routing node is going to output items from the system. So if I throw in spruce wood planks, they get sent over here. That's the basics of using nodes. Now, in addition, there's one other thing you can do without getting into filters, and that is you can set priorities. So for example, if I come over here, I connect that up, I open up this node, and I'm going to set this priority to 5. Now, in normal item transfer systems, most of them, the higher the priority, the more it's going to prioritize sending things to that chest, or whatever it may be. But in blood magic nodes, the lower the priority, the higher it prioritizes it. So having a priority set to 0 is going to prioritize it more than a priority of 5. And this can go all the way up to 9. So you have 10 different priority settings to use. So now if I throw in spruce wood planks, they're going to get sent to this chest instead of this chest, because this one has the priority of 0. Whereas this one has the priority of 5. Now, in addition, when we open this up, you'll notice there's a lot of stuff here. This is where kind of the bulk of what you're going to be doing is done. Priority, we've already talked about. This actually sets the facing. So you have down, up, north, south, west, and east. So when you set up your nodes, you can adjust everything on a per facing basis. So if I have another chest that's here, and I set the priority on this chest, I say the upside is going to be priority of 1, or we'll say the upside is a priority of 0, and the downside is a priority of 1. Now if I throw in spruce wood planks, they're going to get sent to the top chest because it has the lower priority. So you can do all of that on a per side basis. And the same is true with filters. You can do all of that on a per side basis. So you can have up to 6 connections on a single node, and it's not going to cause you any issues. So let's actually get into the bulk of things, the filters. These are pretty straightforward, but you have 3 output filters. That's the Nbt Item Filter, the Mod Item Filter, and the Or Dictionary Filter, not including, of course, the Fluid Filter. We're going to talk about it. It's kind of special case in a lot of the way that it works. And then you also have the precise item filter. Now the precise item filter is the one that chances are you're probably going to use a lot. So if we put in a precise item filter in here and we say spruce wood planks and we set this to 10. This is when you can actually start using this. Any of these filters, any of them can use the numerical count that's here, and this tells it how much of something. And the case depends on if you're using it on the input or the output. But in the case of the precise item filter, if we put 10 spruce wood planks in here, we throw in spruce wood planks, it's going to pull out all but 10 from this. And it's going to send them over to this chest. So having a precise item filter on your input is going to adjust how many items it keeps of that type within the inventory. Now, one thing to note is it is a little bit buggy. So if we set in magnetite ore and we say 32 and we throw in spruce and magnetite, it's going to pull out all but 22 of magnetite. So you can see that generally I would suggest that you have if you're trying to do a precise count and keep a certain amount of items within an inventory, only do one item. If you're doing it on the input, only do one item because if you start doing more, it does start to act up. But the precise item filter, in addition, if we were to set it on, let's actually cut down on our chest so we're not having to manage a lot of stuff here. If we say over here, if we say that you have a precise item filter, and within this precise item filter, we say magnetite and spruce, and we specify we want 14 magnetite ore, or 13. And this just tells you what item you have selected, by the way, this section here. And then we select spruce, and we say we want 20 spruce, okay? And we throw this into here. It's going to pull out 20, and it's going to pull out 13, and it's going to give us exactly the correct amount that we asked for. So if you're trying to do specific items, it works a bit better generally when you're doing your precise filter on the output than it does on the input. But the input does still work. You just kind of have to work around the fact that you can really only do one item. Otherwise, it starts acting really weird if you have multiple items on a precise input. Now moving on, that's pretty much the precise filter. That's just your general filter. It says match this item on all fields. So match it, match... really just match it and match its NBT data, because there's not really like a meta data filter within Blood Magic. But if we come over now and we throw in a new filter, let's throw in the OR dictionary filter. Oh, not on the input. It doesn't do anything on the input. These three will do absolutely nothing if you put them on input. So if we put in OR dictionary and we put in magnetite ore, we throw that in, it does nothing. It can't move anything. It doesn't know what's going on. So just the rest of these only on outputs. But if we put in OR dictionary filter over here and we put in magnetite into this, we throw magnetite ore into there, it's going to pull it out, it's going to send it over. Now one thing to note is with the OR dictionary filter, it matches on the fields of all OR dictionaries applicable to that item. So you can see that if we hit shift on this, we can see that magnetite has metallurgy, magnetite, and ore iron squeezer. All of these come up together, but for example, if we were to get something like banded iron, you can see that banded iron has the ore iron squeezer, but it has metallurgy banded iron and ore banded iron for its other ore dictionaries, and only shares the iron squeezer. But if we throw it into this chest, it is still going to get moved over to this chest because it shares at least one ore dictionary setting with what we put into the filter. Now moving on, we have the mod item filter. This does what you might expect. It filters things based on mod. So if we put in a blank slate, that comes from Blood Magic. We come over here and we put in blank slates, of course they're going to get moved, but also anything from the same mod, in this case Demon Wheel crystals, will also get moved to this chest. Pretty straightforward. And once again, you can set specific amounts if you want to keep so many. So for example, if I say keep 20 in here, what it's going to do is if I throw in a blank slate, it's going to move that. If I throw in Demon Wheel crystals, it's going to pull out 19. It now has 20 items from the Blood Magic Alchemical Wizardry mod. So it's going to, that and the ore dictionary are going to kind of work on a just bulk basis. So, you know, we're keeping 20 Blood Magic items. Okay, any combination of 20 will work. If you're doing ore dictionary, any combination of 20 of that item will work. Now next up, last up for the items, we have the Nbt Item Filter, and this basically it just filters things while ignoring NBT. This is really good if you have something that uses enchanted books or items that may be damaged, like if you have a mob farm and you want to send the golden sword somewhere, you can use an Nbt Item Filter to do that because it's going to completely ignore any NBT settings of an item. So if we put in, say, an enchanted book, this one has protection 1, this one has blast protection, and we throw that into there, it's going to send both of them over because they're the same item, they just have different NBT data. So if you have things that are name tagged, NBT filter will work with those, just anything that works on a NBT system. So they're the same item, they're just different based on NBT. And that's pretty much the filters. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy stuff. Let me throw that out. And now next up, let's talk about the fluid filter. This is pretty straightforward, but I think it tricks up a lot of people in the way that it works because it is a bit strange. Generally, I suggest to people only have one fluid per connection. And the reason being, if you start adding additional fluids, it's not going to work whatsoever. It's only going to recognize the first fluid that you put in. So if we have a couple tanks here, we put an input node on one, we put an output node on the other, and we just connect this up. Now, one thing to note, this can be connected up to an item system. It's not going to cause any issues if it's connected to an item system. That's not a problem for it. It can handle it. But if we set this up and we put in, say, lava into this tank, it's not going to do anything. It requires there to be a fluid filter that is configured. And by configured, I mean put a fluid filter in there and say we want to send lava. And then we have to come over to the output and we have to put, once again, a fluid filter and say lava. Now it's going to start sending, a bucket at a time, it's going to start sending that lava over to this tank. Now if I had another connection, say over here, just to show you as an example, if we set up another fluid system and this one has water, we'll go ahead and just configure this one out, connect all this up like so. And if we come over here now and we throw in water, you can see it does absolutely nothing with it. But if we put in lava, it still moves the lava. With fluid filters, you really have to have a dedicated system per fluid type. Otherwise, it's just not going to do anything with the other fluids that you set. So you're just wasting your time. Only do one fluid. Now, another thing to note, priorities do still work with the fluid systems, but there is a small caveat you have to be aware of if we have additional tanks. Okay, and we set all these up and we configure all of these to do lava. So that's all configured up. If we add lava into this, if we're only moving a bucket at a time, it's basically just going to find the closest at highest priority that it can. So it's basically just sending buckets over to this. If we set this to a priority of 1 though, it's going to find that one. If we set this one to a priority of 1, it's going to find that one, and so on. So it's basically looking for whatever node is closest and has, the lowest priority setting, so that's the highest priority. I'm going to send my liquid there. But if you have a lot of fluid, if we start dumping this in, I'll deal with that lava in a moment, you can see that it's going to start sending its lava all over the place, and it's trying to send a bucket at a time to each available inventory. But you'll notice that at this point it has now stopped moving lava entirely. If we remove this tank, you could see that it's going to start filling those up again. So you can move pretty much as many output nodes set to a liquid as you have with just one input node. There's no limits that I've ever found to moving those. But the problem arises in that whenever a tank gets filled, and this is where you can work with it and you could have multiple outputs. Generally, I find it best just to do a dedicated system per type, but you could see as soon as this one has filled up, it's still moving to that one. But any one that's farther back on the line, it's going to stop getting fluid. because it's going to say, well, these are full, so I'm done working. And you can see that even connecting this node over to that, it stops working. So the best way that you can handle this is either have, you can use priorities. So if I set this to a 1 and this one to a 1, what's going to happen is now it's prioritizing these other tanks. If I set, a really good way to handle this is do this one as a 0, this one as a 1, this one as a 2, 3, and 4. And it really kind of depends on what you're doing with this, with these fluids, as to how well it's going to work. But if I set this up now, I'll tell you what, let me just upgrade this to a creative tank just because it makes it a little bit easier for us. But you can see that this is all going to start filling up equally, right? And everything's going well. But what's going to happen is whenever this fills up, all of them are now filled up at the same rate. But if we were to break this and do that, it's not going to do anything. Do that, nothing, nothing, nothing. Because the lowest priority is set, is full. And so it's not going to do anything else. So the best thing to do is if you have maybe a couple cases where you have fluid being pumped out regularly and quickly, set that one to a low priority. Because if I had say a conduit set up and it was pumping out the liquid, then you're going to say that it's going to keep sending fluid to this because I'm using the fluid from this one. So it kind of depends on what you're doing with it. Can you set it up to make it work? And how quickly you're using those fluids and things like that. Because, for example, if this pulls out only, say, 100 millibuckets from this tank, then there's only 100 millibuckets that it can add to all the other tanks on that system. Because it will never send more fluid to these other tanks as what it can send to this tank, right? Because it's the lowest priority. Being the same priority, you can kind of do a little bit more, but once again, it's really on a basis of your setup. Because now, for example, if I had that, you could see that it's seeing this one, but on the flip side, it's going to, if these fill up, it's not going to send any more down this line because it's whatever's closest. It's a little bit weird to use in that regard, and I think fluid filters were never quite finished, so you kind of have to play around with them a little bit. But hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with your fluids. So it's a little bit of messing around. You can see that if I never remove this one, even with the shortcut added, if I never remove this one, since it's the closest, it's the only one that it's going to see, unless I set the priority up, and then it looks for lower priorities on the same system. So hopefully that makes sense. A little bit weird to explain, but hopefully that makes sense. But you can see that item transfer still works on the same system. Just don't do more than one fluid. And generally, if you can, I would set up, probably, depending on the situation, you may want a master routing node per fluid connection. Unless you have things, like I said, that are pulling fluids consistently, set them to the lower priority and everything else to the higher priority, so that it can keep feeding those, but allow the other ones to maybe fill up. If you're stockpiling a liquid or something like that, it works very, very well in that situation. So for example, let's set this one to 0, and let's say, just as an example, if we set 1,000 millibuckets into this one, you can see that it still stops up the system just like as if the tank was full, because it can't send any more fluid to this. So I just wanted to point that out. It doesn't bypass that weird quirkiness of it. So you still have to make plans for it, but it can be used. You just have to, like I said, you have to plan for it and maybe use it as something where the fluid's being consistently used, and then you have like secondary priorities that are basically buffering that fluid. Because it's going to work on a priority system. So your one that's constantly using fluid, it's fine that the other ones are buffered up as long as they're a lower priority than the one that's constantly using the fluid. But anyways, I hope that covers blood magic nodes for you guys and answers any questions you may have. If you do have any more questions, though, let me know down in the comments. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button. And go ahead and subscribe if you're not already to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care. Stay safe. I'll see you guys next time.